Some people just can't leave well enough alone. They've got everything: brains, achievements, reputation, and instead of sitting back and enjoying the perks, they keep digging, keep reaching, until they blow their own lives up. That's pretty much what happened to one of the most notorious scholars of the Renaissance. A man so brilliant, so restless, that when books, reason, and faith couldn't give him what he wanted, he went looking for answers in the one place you're never supposed to look. Welcome to the legend of the man who summoned a demon, sold his soul, and bought himself 24 years of power, pleasure, and knowledge, only to find out the fine print in hell's contract is never worth signing. So picture this world: 16th century Germany caught between two ages. On one side, the medieval order still holding on for dear life, churches dictating truth, priests warning of eternal damnation, traditions passed down like chains you couldn't escape. On the other side, the Renaissance roaring into being, artists sketching the human body like it was a divine blueprint, explorers stumbling into entire continents, scientists daring to say the sun, not the earth, was at the center of the universe. It was chaos, old faith and new reason colliding like tectonic plates. And right in the middle of all this stood a scholar, ambitious, arrogant, unsatisfied. He wasn't dabbling in one or two fields. He devoured them all: theology, medicine, law, philosophy, astrology, you name it, he mastered it. He debated professors and left them humiliated. He read the classics until their wisdom poured out of his ears. By all accounts, he should have been fulfilled. But the more he learned, the emptier he felt. Every path he walked ended in the same dead end. We're human, we're mortal, and no amount of study changes that. That emptiness drove him mad. And one night, in a fit of frustration and pride, he did the unthinkable. He shoved aside his holy texts, cursed the limits of human reason, and sketched a circle on the floor of his study. With trembling hands, he lit candles, chanted forbidden words, and sealed the act with a curse so blasphemous that even the walls seemed to hold their breath. And then, something answered. The air grew heavy, the flames flickered, and from the shadows stepped a figure. Not the snarling beast with claws and horns the church liked to paint, but something far more dangerous. A well-dressed, sharp-tongued man with the cool confidence of someone who already knows he's going to win. This was Mephistopheles. He didn't roar, he didn't threaten, he simply offered. 24 years of everything the scholar craved: limitless knowledge, worldly pleasures, wealth, and power that could bend kings and emperors to his will. And after those 24 years, hell would own his soul. Simple deal. Now, most people would hesitate here. Eternal torment on one side, temporary satisfaction on the other. It doesn't exactly take a genius to see which is smarter. But genius isn't the same as wisdom. Our scholar, blinded by pride, convinced himself hell wasn't real, or if it was, he could outsmart it. He pricked his arm, drew blood, and signed the contract. When the wound clotted and refused to bleed, when strange words appeared on his skin warning him to flee, he ignored it all. He wanted the deal too badly, and so it began. Overnight, he became larger than life. His reputation spread across Europe like wildfire. He conjured riches from thin air, traveled in a chariot pulled by dragons, dined with royalty, and made priests and popes look like fools. He showed up invisible at the Pope's banquet, stole food off his plate, and even slapped him across the face just for laughs. He summoned the spirit of Alexander the Great at the Holy Roman Emperor's court and added tiny historical details, like a mole on his cheek, to prove it was authentic. Nobles gasped, crowds whispered, and soon he was a celebrity. But here's the irony. For all his brilliance, for all his promises to unlock the secrets of the cosmos, he wasted his power on cheap stunts. When a knight insulted him, he magically sprouted antlers from the poor man's head. When a horse dealer tried to cheat him, he sold the man a magnificent steed that turned into hay the moment it touched water. These weren't the acts of a philosopher king. These were party tricks, the amusements of a jester with too much power, and yet the people loved it. He became infamous, a walking contradiction, a scholar who could have changed the world, reduced to a sideshow magician with hell at his back. But while the crowds laughed, he began to feel the weight of time pressing on him. Every day was a day closer to the bill coming due. And when you've made a deal with the devil, you don't get extensions. As the years slipped away, the bravado started to crumble. He was haunted constantly by his conscience, by angels, by demons. Sometimes a good angel would whisper, "Repent, turn back, it's never too late." Other times, a darker voice hissed, "You're already damned." Why waste time begging? That battle raged inside him, but pride kept him chained. He had made the deal. He had mocked faith too long to crawl back to it now. And in the middle of that turmoil, he made one final, heartbreaking request. He asked to see Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in all of myth, the face that launched 1,000 ships. And she came, at least her illusion did. She appeared before him, radiant, untouchable, like a goddess carved from starlight. He gazed at her, desperate for meaning, and whispered, "Make me immortal with a kiss." But the kiss was cold. She was nothing but smoke and shadow. And in that moment, he realized the ultimate truth of his bargain. Everything he had received was empty. Illusions, tricks, fleeting pleasures. He had traded his soul for 24 years of nothing, and the clock was almost out. The night of reckoning finally came. 24 years had raced past like a dream, and now the dream was cracking into a nightmare. The scholar, once so cocky, so untouchable, was unraveling. He gathered his students, the young men who had once admired him, who had once believed he held every secret of the universe in his hands. And for the first time, the mask of genius slipped. His voice shook as he confessed. He told them everything. The circle, the words, the demon, the contract. 24 years of power in exchange for his soul. The pact he had signed in blood. Their faces drained of color. Some trembled. Others whispered prayers under their breath. But not one of them left. They stayed, horrified but loyal, desperate to protect their master, desperate to find some loophole in a deal written in hell's ink. They begged him to repent, to fall on his knees, to cry out to Christ for mercy. But even as they pleaded, he knew, deep down, there was no escape. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The clock's hands crept toward midnight with merciless slowness. Each tick sounded louder than the last, echoing in the chamber like a hammer on stone. The bravado that had carried him through 24 years, mocking priests, laughing at fear, ridiculing faith, was gone. His pride was broken. He trembled. He begged, not to the devil, but to God. He lifted his hands to the ceiling and pleaded with the heavens to freeze time, to stop the stars, to jam the gears of the universe. "Let the planets stand still," he cried. "Let the sun rise again, and midnight never come." His desperation spilled into every corner of the room. He promised to destroy his books, those same volumes he once clung to like treasures. He swore to repent, to throw away the pride that had damned him. He offered bargains of his own, to spend 1,000 years in hell, 100,000. If only at the end he could taste salvation. His voice cracked, his words tumbled over one another, the pleas of a man drowning in his own terror. He was willing to endure chains, fire, torment, anything but eternity. The thought of endless damnation crushed him, pressed down on his chest until each breath was a struggle. His mind, once razor-sharp, flickered with despair. One moment he cursed himself for his arrogance. The next he cursed his parents for bringing him into a world where a soul could be lost forever. He wished he had been born an animal, soulless, free to fade into nothingness at death, rather than a man doomed to carry the unbearable weight of eternity. But no matter how he begged, no matter what promises he threw into the air, the clock did not stop. It moved forward, steady, inevitable, each second dragging him closer to the end he had chosen. But time doesn't bargain. The clock ticked forward. Midnight arrived, and then it happened. The study shook with thunder. The candles blew out. The air filled with the stench of sulfur. The doors burst open with a crack like lightning, and voices, horrible, inhuman voices, echoed through the room. The students fled, terrified, but the scholar stayed, screaming for mercy, screaming for more time, screaming the name of the demon who had stood by him all those years, Mephistopheles. And then, silence. By morning, the students returned to find only horror. The study was a wreck, smeared with blood, teeth scattered across the floor, an eye in the corner, his body twisted and mangled, as if ripped apart by invisible hands. They found him outside, dumped like garbage, his neck broken, his limbs grotesquely bent. The once great scholar, who had dared to bargain with hell itself, was nothing but a mutilated warning. For the church, this was the perfect moral lesson. They told the story everywhere. See what happens when pride outruns faith, when knowledge outruns humility, when man thinks he can play God. It was meant to scare people back into obedience, a cautionary tale carved in blood and terror. But here's the funny thing about stories. They don't always behave the way you want them to. Instead of dying as a sermon, the legend of Faust grew. Writers, poets, thinkers, they picked it up, twisted it, reimagined it. In 1587, the first big book about him was printed, and it spread like wildfire. A generation later, Christopher Marlowe turned it into a play. His Faust was still doomed, still dragged to hell, but he wasn't a clown anymore. He was tragic, a man undone by his own unstoppable ambition. And then, centuries later, Goethe took the tale and flipped it completely. His Faust was still flawed, still guilty, still greedy. He still made the deal, still hurt people, still fell into sin. But Goethe refused to see him as damned. In his version, angels sweep in at the end and save him, not because he was good, not because he deserved it, but because he never stopped striving. He never settled. He never gave up on the hunger for more. In Goethe's eyes, that hunger was divine. The very thing that made us human was what gave Faust redemption. And that's why this story still matters today. Because let's be honest, we're all living in a Faustian world now. We've split the atom. We've mapped the human genome. We've built machines that can think faster than we can. We're tinkering with life itself, flirting with the idea of outsmarting death. Every one of those breakthroughs has come with its own devil's bargain. More power, more progress, but what are we giving up in exchange? Faust's story is a mirror. It shows us the danger of chasing too much, too fast, without asking what it costs. But it also shows us the beauty in that hunger, the refusal to be satisfied, the drive to reach beyond the limits of what seems possible. That's why the story refuses to die. Because it isn't just about one arrogant scholar in a German study, it's about us. About our ambition, our arrogance, our brilliance, and our fear. So was Faust a fool who deserved his fate? Or was he a hero, a tragic symbol of humanity itself, always stretching, always striving, even if it kills us? That's the question the story leaves behind. And maybe that's the real power of it. The devil, as the saying goes, always keeps his promises. But we're the ones who have to decide whether the bargain is worth it. If this story made you think, if it gave you chills, or even if it made you laugh at the absurdity of a genius wasting hell's power on pranks, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more forgotten legends and haunting tales from history, hit subscribe. Because the past still has plenty of dark corners left to explore.